Well, President Trump heads back to the Texas-Mexico border today to continue his push for a border wall. This visit comes as the Friday deadline approaches for congressional lawmakers to strike a deal on border security. The president will hold his first campaign rally of the year Monday in El Paso today. During his State of the Union address last week, the president said the city proves a border wall can reduce violent crime. Paso's mayor disputed the claim, saying it was never one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. Meanwhile, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke is not shying away from the spotlight as President Trump prepares to head to his hometown. The Democrat plans to lead a march through El Paso this evening, then speak at a celebration event across the street from President Trump's rally. O'Rourke's team says the events are intended to highlight El Paso's strength and push back against the border wall.